Hello everyone, David here. This is probably going to be the most difficult video that I've ever made, and perhaps even be one of the last videos I make for this page. I'm going to try my best to get through this. I've written down some of my thoughts on paper because just due to the sensitive nature of what I'm going to be going through today. So, without further ado, here it goes. Today is the last day I will ever be in what used to be a beautiful home for my children and I. We've been forced out, and my 3 teens and I have been forced apart indefinitely for the remainder of their childhood. Partly because some of you were gracious enough to contribute to the GoFundMe I set up to fight for my children, and partly because I have seen a great evil in our family court system that is destroying the lives of our community's children and parents. I feel a need to speak out about my experience and how I've come to be temporarily homeless as of today. Before I start, I want to emphasize that I love the mother of my children as my sister in Christ. None of this is intended to disparage her. This is very difficult to do. I'm going to try to share my perspective in the most loving way possible. It's not easy to talk about this because after over 10 years of being told one thing, believing someone and what they were telling me, I've found out she's been telling a completely fabricated nightmare to defend herself from the guilt she felt over divorcing us. I want to start by talking a little bit about what God, this page is all devoted to my God, our God, Yahweh, the Creator who made all things. He refers to his children, the church on earth, as the bride of Christ, and that in the life to come, we will be perfectly married to Jesus Christ, his bride, the church. He told us in this life that what he has joined together, let no one separate. He gives us marriage in this life, I believe, primarily for the raising of children. God tells us there will be no children in the life to come, no one given into marriage like they are in this life, other than the fact that we all, as the church of the bride of Christ, will be married to Jesus in perfect love and truth. But marriage only exists in this life, and again, I think that the main reason for that is for the raising of children, so that they have a stable living environment as they're growing and maturing in this life. God is so adamant about marriage being a lifelong union for the stability of the children and also for the love of the couple, that he says he hates divorce. God doesn't use the word hate very often, but he says he hates divorce. And he says under no circumstances should you get divorced. In his word, he says only for the hardness of their hearts will I allow it in situations where someone's been unfaithful. So in sexual unfaithfulness, breaking the marriage bond in that way, but it says even in that situation, if possible, try to heal from that and forgive and move on and grow. But that's the only real reason given for divorce in the Bible. It even goes so far as to say, if a man or woman divorces their spouse for a reason other than sexual unfaithfulness and remarries someone else, that they are committing adultery by remarrying that new person. So the point of this is to say God sets a very high standard for what marriage is supposed to be. Love equals commitment. If we don't stay with someone, we aren't really loving them. The only difference between marriage and dating someone is the commitment piece. You can leave someone if you're just dating, but if you're married, you're there through thick and thin, sickness and health, through death, till death do us part. Now, I had a really happy, healthy marriage modeled for me growing up. I'm very pleased to say that my parents are still together, and I really wanted to be able to give that to my children, that beautiful marriage that I saw modeled for me. At no point were my parents ever abusive with me in any way, just completely supporting and put my training, especially in God's Word, as their top priority, and still support me and love me to this day. I had hoped that I would be able to give that to my children. When I first met the mother of my teens, my ex-wife, we were in high school. I was, if you've been following my journey, which I'm not going to be getting into very deeply today, you'll know that I struggled with panic attacks from a traumatic incident from when I was younger. When I met my ex-wife, her parents had divorced, but they were still living together at that time, which is a really, really difficult thing for her to be going through. We bonded in our brokenness and started dating sophomore year of high school. We broke up briefly, but continued keeping in touch and got back together and dated through college again. We both experimented with self-medicating at that time, trying things like alcohol, marijuana, and even psychedelics together. We partied together, we traveled together, we went to school near each other. We even got married and started a family. We had 3 children within 3 years. I got a great job and bought the house she was raised in from her dad. We were active in our church, and raising our children in God's Word was our top priority. We loved spending time together as a family, and I have so many memories, many captured on home videos, of us being silly together as a family and loving life. We were truly blessed to be a family full of love. We worked opposite shifts and saw very little of each other. One of the worst things we did was we stopped making date nights for each other. We were like 2 ships passing in the night, and we stopped putting each other first. Unprocessed trauma and negative emotion from our childhood, along with poor communication in our marriage, led to major stress. As the years went on, it became clear we each had negative ways of coping, addictions, with our stress, and neither of us was seeking consistent counseling. We both lied about our addictions and tried to hide them from each other. I've apologized for lying to her many times before, but want to do that again here. I am genuinely sorry for lying about self-medicating. There were times I grew and tried to share my feelings when I would have cravings with her, but it was difficult because she was struggling too. We truly both needed individual counseling and couples counseling. I did seek individual counseling for the first time for my self-medicating with marijuana in 2010. I was able to find some extended time without using, but hadn't yet processed the underlying core reason that I was self-medicating, and as a result I was still experiencing symptoms of depression. In 2012, my mom recommended I get my thyroid checked, as thyroid issues ran in our family. I went, and the nurse practitioner I saw recommended medication to help ease my symptoms. I declined at first, but after another appointment and more talking, she convinced me to try and ended up prescribing me Xanax. I had never been prescribed this before, and at that time didn't know much about it. The only other medication I had taken prior was called citalopram, which was an SSRI, much different than this benzodiazepine that I was being given now. I've since learned that benzodiazepines are basically like taking synthetic alcohol in a pill. So a much different thing than what I had, the one medication I had experience with prior to that. I went home, I took the morning dose and the noon dose, and within a couple hours, I had a completely adverse reaction to this medication, was essentially on autopilot as if I was drunk, and was really, really scared. I had never been that out of control ever in my life. I remember, and by out of control, I remember feeling chemicals swirling in my brain and not knowing how to make it stop. After the event, I had remembered what happened and cross-checked it with her to see if our stories matched, and they did. When I felt myself under the influence of this medication in 2012, it was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. I remember my main focus was to try and get away from the family. There was a point where my ex-wife and I were yelling at each other, and she started jabbing me in the chest to make separation between us. I don't think she was trying to hurt me. I think that she was scared and I was scared, and she was trying to make separation between us. That's it. I put my arms, around her elbows to get her to stop jabbing me, and that was it. And then there was a point where she was standing between the door and I was trying to get out. So I did like a running back move past her to try and get out of the house, and then I left. She went to my sister's and they called the police for help. That's everything that happened that day. It happened pretty quickly. At no point did I have any thoughts of being violent or aggressive with her. The truth is, I've never been violent with anyone in my entire life. I've never once tried to even punch anybody. This incident, I was trying to get away from the family. At no point did I come after her or attack her. And that's what she said as well at that time. She adamantly told me and my parents and police no abuse had ever happened, not that day or any time previously. The police wrote 2 charges from taking her report. I'm not actually sure why any charges were filed based off of what happened. In my current job that I have now, I work regularly with law enforcement, and I've had an officer explain to me that this incident in the county where I work now would not ever have been considered a criminal incident. It would have been considered a family health crisis because that's what it was. They dismissed the charge associated with me trying to stop her from jabbing me. She even drew a diagram which showed that my arms were around her elbows and that at no point was I trying to attack her. She even told me she was going to push for all of the charges to be removed. And this is where my first clue came up that maybe she was lying behind the scenes. My first clue that she was not being completely forthcoming with me was that she never did follow up on this like she said she wanted to. I barely even fought any of the legal charges because at that time, my main focus was trying to stay together with her, and her and I were still talking like that was the goal. My other clue that she had a different version of events than what she was telling me was the way people who knew her treated me. As the years went on, I even tried being civil with her new husband that she remarried, but he avoided me like the plague, and most people associated with her treated me like I was some kind of degenerate criminal, whereas my family would treat her with love and support. At no point with the church or through this criminal process was I being accused of abuse. The court did ask me to do an anger management class in response to the charges that were filed. Even though this was a freak incident involving a newly prescribed medication I didn't ask for and didn't involve any anger issues, I still took the class. Again, my main concern was keeping the family together at all costs, and I was doing all I could for that purpose. I did treatment in response to that day. Everything I was asked to do. I was not accused of abuse, and for that reason, I was not asked to do any type of abuse training class. She told me, my ex-wife, that the only reason she did file for divorce was because her mom gave her an ultimatum. She said her mom gave her a check to give to the attorney and said, if you don't do this, I'm disowning you. At that time, her dad was not in the picture and she only had her mom for support. She told me soon after the divorce she regretted it and would have done it differently if she had the chance. After she filed for the divorce, we still spent time together as a family, and she told me clearly she wanted to work it out. Ultimately, though, she left me without even one marriage counseling session or trial separation after nearly 8 years of marriage, 15 years of being together, and 3 children. I was absolutely devastated. She quickly remarried, but now I had no home, no job, a new criminal record, which has impacted my ability to get jobs, and false accusations of abuse, which I'll be getting into here, has really impacted my ability to form any kind of romantic relationships because of what is still stuck on CCAP on my record from this day. Despite not getting any apologies from the church or from my ex-wife, and despite my life being in absolute shambles and being homeless at that time, I moved on. I moved into my parents' basement. My ex-wife and I had a decade of shared equal placement and peaceful collaborative co-parenting. I eventually got a home for my children and I. My ex-wife and I were, I felt, a model of co-parenting at our former church of how good it can be. It was that peaceful and collaborative, and was a true blessing for my children and I started a worship band and became as active as possible in my church, moving past the divorce and what happened with the pastor. I went back to school and slowly put my life back together. I got my bachelor's in psychology in 2018. I got my master's in clinical counseling in 2022. 2 years ago, my ex-wife started a senseless placement battle, the first ever in our relationship as co-parents, immediately after apologizing to me for divorcing our family. It came at a time when we were bonding over the addiction that she had in our marriage, and we were talking about how we both had negative ways of coping, and that was really what caused our divorce, and it led her to apologizing to me. I forgave her, and I shared my feelings at that time in an appropriate and supportive way, because it was the first time in a decade that we had ever talked about our divorce. It was the only time we were ever going to be talking about it, and hopefully putting it to rest after that. So I shared with her that I forgave her, that I would take her back if she was willing to start over, but that I would continue to love and support her as I had for the last decade if she didn't want to. That I understood that she had a new husband and a new family now. I don't regret sharing my feelings in that moment. It was an appropriate moment given her apology, and it's okay for me to share my feelings there. And I think it's really sick for anyone who says that it's not okay, whether our children were around or not. I'm happy to have modeled the strength of showing my feelings regardless of someone's reaction, as long as I'm doing it in a loving and supportive way. I'm also proud of modeling vulnerability that day. And this is something that I want to include. So I did share a vulnerability with her that day that she ultimately ended up using against me and distorting. But one of the things that I also tried to do that day to ease her, I really appreciated that she apologized to me, and I didn't want to put the blame on her, because I truly didn't actually even blame her for the divorce. She was put in a horrible situation and made to make an awful choice. And so there's a Disney movie called Tangled, which describes the fairy tale of Rapunzel. Rapunzel's all about a child who is kept locked away in a tower with lies. She's being kept away from good, benevolent parenting, which is symbolized by her parents in the castle and the kingdom that is sending out lanterns in the sky on her birthday every year in remembrance of her. But then there's the Oedipal mother, the mother who keeps her trapped away for her own benefit, manipulates her and abuses her, and models what tyrannical, malevolent parenting can look like. I showed a clip from that movie where Rapunzel is stuck on the shore and she's having to choose between seeing the love of her life going towards the castle, the truth of her family, towards her parents. She's looking off into the shore, into the sunset, seeing what her life could be and all the truth and the love and the hope. And then she's looking back to the dark, murky forest, to the lies that her mother is telling her, and she's trying to make a decision. And my point with showing that clip to her, or trying to show that clip to her, she wouldn't watch it, was to say, I don't blame you. I don't blame you at all. And so I forgave her, but at the same time, didn't even blame her. So that was my point of showing that clip that day and modeling vulnerability for her. She became absolutely angry after that day. It was the first time in a decade that we had talked about the divorce, but the reason I know now that she became angry is it was the first time where the narrative that she had been telling for that decade behind the scenes, apart from me, was starting to come to light. Two worlds were converging. The world where she had told me the truth, and the world where she had, because of her guilt, made up a lie. She felt ashamed in that moment and started a smear campaign against me. On the original court paperwork that she filed, she cited that I was obsessed and delusional about getting back together with her. Then it was, oh, I'm on drugs. Then it was, I'm just crazy. And so the court originally said both parties would have to take psychiatric evaluations to keep it fair, but this commissioner only ended up forcing me to do it. The stress from this corruption, combined with the stress of losing my children and my home, combined with the corruption from my former pastor after sharing my story, I had a nervous breakdown. They jumped on this like vultures and used it as an opportunity to permanently take my children away. I talk about this incident in detail in the last live video I posted about leaving the church I was raised in. You can listen there if you'd like. But again, there was absolutely no accusations of abuse in this incident whatsoever. This was me having a nervous breakdown. There was not even a hint of abuse alleged here. I was asked to see Child Protective Services. They cleared me within a month. They toured my home, said I have a nice, loving home for my children, and didn't give any restrictions and recommended immediate reunification with my children. That's Child Protective Services, whose job it is to determine safe living environments for children. They also wrote in the report that they saw signs of manipulation on the part of my children's mother. I was cleared by a licensed psychiatrist. This involved about 5 trips to Milwaukee, about an hour away from me, $4,200 of money that I didn't have, comprehensive battery. She ordered immediate reunification with my children. That was done within 3 months of being asked to do it. I was cleared by an AODA specialist who did an assessment on me. I took drug tests, including a hair follicle test. As part of my practicum for my master's degree in clinical counseling, I completed an abuse training course. Not that it was recommended by anyone, it was just part of my practicum. I was also cleared by a licensed therapist. On top of all that, I now work for local government as a representative for the county working mobile crisis. That means that I get calls from law enforcement, doctors, school counselors, parents, concerned individuals in the community. Whenever they have reports of someone who is presenting with suicidal or homicidal ideations, and I go and respond independently, and they take my recommendation on how to intervene, oftentimes with children. So I make life and death decisions on other people's children, but don't even get to see mine right now. I fought hard. I was cleared by every professional possible I was asked to see. I did it all in about 3 months. It took another 8 months to get to the next hearing though, even though I had everything done. It seemed like anytime my ex-wife would ask for a hearing, it would happen within a month, but anytime I would ask for it, it would take about a year. Despite being cleared by every mental health professional possible, I'm being asked, my ex-wife, to take a batterer's class. In other words, a class for people who abuse others. I've never abused anyone. Furthermore, she moved our children from their established mental health providers to the domestic violence area at the hospital throughout the course of this placement battle. So after apologizing for the divorce, she started a placement battle against me, called me delusional, a druggie, crazy, when we were closer than ever, and then says that despite being cleared by every mental health professional possible, that I now have to take a batterer's class. And what's the rationale for that? The incident from 2012 that she used to adamantly say that I never abused anyone. Attorneys run family court. It doesn't include any mental health professionals. They only have degrees in law, at least in this family court. I couldn't afford an attorney at first because I had to pay $7,000 worth of assessments, and I had that done in 3 months. Despite having those $7,000 worth of assessments done in 3 months, it took 8 months to get to the next hearing. My ex-wife then pushed for back child support of $8,000 and asked that I pay $1,400 a month in child support, despite the fact that I've already been cleared by every mental health professional possible who has ordered immediate reunification with my children, in which case I should have shared equal placement like I had them for the last decade and shouldn't be paying child support. This court abused my children by forcing them to choose between their parents. When you force a child to choose between their parent, you're telling them that half of their heart is fundamentally broken, and therefore a piece of them is fundamentally broken. When you put them in the position of having to make an adult decision like placement, that's abuse. A clinical definition of abuse, child abuse, is keeping a child separated from their happy, healthy parent. They've abused my children and I in this way as well. The other part of putting a child in the position of having to choose placement is then they have to try and reconcile that decision in their minds. And it's by nature a pathological decision that they should never have been forced to make. When I was growing up with my parents in my teenage years, that was when I treated my dad probably the worst. It's a part of normal human healthy development, is you're trying to gain separation and your own independence at that point in your life, in your teenage and adolescent years. You're trying to form your own identity. And so there's a lot of things I said to my dad at that time that I really regret. And if at that time someone came in and said, you can kick your dad out and decide when you want to see him again, I probably would have been like, yeah, party on, all right. And it would have been the worst thing for my development possible. Dads are there to help form us, and we need dads just as much as moms. The intern who was counseling one of my children at this domestic violence area that they were moved to throughout the course of this battle said in court that because there was one time when I was working during my master's program, I worked at a pizza delivery job, and there was one time where I told my daughter she could stay home with her teenage brothers. They were all teenagers for an hour and a half while I worked a lunch hour, and she could work on homework and some laundry or whatever. Typically, I would let them go by their mom every time I was working, and anytime she would ask for them. Countless times she asked for vacation days on my days or special events, and I would always facilitate that. There was literally one time where I didn't let my daughter go by her mom during my placement time for an hour and a half and said, why don't you stay home with your brothers? This intern at the domestic violence area counseling department told my daughter that was physical violence, that I physically abused my daughter because of that. The court even changed their answer when I fought the batterers class with the money that I was given from people who supported my GoFundMe. Originally, they tried to say it's just because of an arbitrary statute from the 2012 incident. However, it was not ordered then. And to be honest, if it would have been ordered then, I probably would have done it because, again, at that time, a decade ago, I was trying to keep my family together at all costs. I did the anger management course even though I had never struggled with managing my anger. So the fact that they were asking me to do something now, a decade later, that they didn't even ask me to do then, was a pretty clear indicator what was going on here. We had a decade of shared equal placement then. I obviously wasn't seen too dangerous to have shared equal placement of my kids for that decade since. Now they're clearly trying to gaslight my vulnerable children, and they do it all the time. This is common practice. Parents kill themselves, many of them. I feel lucky to at least be alive to even tell you about this hellish experience. I heard her say in the courtroom, she's told my kids she divorced me to protect them from me. And she's now telling people I grabbed her and strangled her that day in 2012. I've decided I cannot in good conscience take this class. She's completely fabricated this lie. I never heard her say it because she knew she couldn't say it to me until now. The fact of the matter is I was not asked to take an abuse training course then. I had shared equal placement of my kids for the decade since, peaceful co-parenting since. Even if they wanted me to do an abuse class, I did it after this event for my master's in clinical counseling. I've thought a lot about whether I should just do the class. But here's the thing, is the damage has already been done, first of all. I've seen the pain in my children. They're having to try and sift through all of this madness, and it's not right. They shouldn't be put in that position, and I don't blame them 1 second. It's not their fault. I could go and do the class and say, oh, I know I'm not abusive. I know I've never even tried to strike anyone in my whole life. I know that one of my core values is trying to solve everything with words. That's why I wanted to become a counselor and help people. And I could say I know the truth, and I could go in there and take that class and have it be on my record and admit guilt. But the court has already told me, kids don't have to go by you anyway. It's their choice. The kids are being told that they have a choice to choose between their parents, and that's the biggest lie that I want to call out. Kids don't have a choice between their parents. They're happy, healthy parents. Kids need both of their parents, and you're abusing them if you tell them that they can cut out their family prior to being 18. Anytime prior to being 18. That's a lie. Kids don't believe it. Parents don't believe it. Kids need both of their parents equally. If one of the parents is struggling, they need to be flooded with support. In this situation, a courtroom run by attorneys, and which is completely defying every mental health professional recommendation, the very professionals that they sent me to. These snake-like attorneys are abusing our children and parents. I've thought about Martin Luther was asked to recant his message, and he had a hill that he died on and said, I will not and cannot recant. Jesus Christ could have easily avoided dying on the hill he chose to die on for us. He could have walked away and chosen the path of least resistance. He could have said, yeah, no, I know the truth. I know I'm the Christ, but I won't say it now. But you know what he did? He didn't back down. He said, I am the Son of God, and you'll see me coming on the clouds. And he took that crucifixion, that unjust crucifixion. So, I've been forced to do this. I have to die on this hill. I've already lost our home because of how long this battle's taken, because of how long they've prolonged this. Could have been done within 3 months. And one of my children tell me that their mother's new husband, when he was asking to come over by me, said, "We're paying good money for you to keep you away from him." To say something like that, "We're paying good money to keep you away from him." I can't even begin to describe like how abusive a statement like that is, coming from a quote-unquote stepfather about a child's father, in this situation especially. So even when they're asking to come by me, they're being told that they can't. Kids raised without their biological dads are much more likely to end up in poverty and or incarcerated. You know, it's funny, when I tried to say if this was flipped around, they'd never force this on her. You know, if she had, let's say, had a nervous breakdown because she felt abused by her pastor, and if I was trying to gaslight our children and say that she abused me 10 years ago and take them away at a moment when her and I were actually bonding and closer than ever, and if she had then gone through all the steps of being cleared by a mental psychiatrist, AODA specialist, CPS, a therapist, and then had gotten her master's degree in clinical counseling, if I at that point were to keep our children away from her, I would be a monster. When I tried to say this in court, they kept objecting and calling it hearsay. They didn't want to hear the truth. Money I now pay in max child support is earned from counseling other people's kids in crisis. $1,400 a month that I earn from being called to spend time with other people's kids, where I form rapport with them and come up with plans with their families to keep them safe and improve their mental health over time. That money is going to pay child support to my children who are being kept away from me. I don't even get to visit them. This is indentured servitude. I don't get to see my kids. I've heard in my work, family court can be one of the biggest drivers in suicidal and homicidal ideation. That's been the really interesting juxtaposition of going through this placement battle at this time, at the very time when I've been getting cleared by mental health professionals, not only just for this battle, but also in my work. It's not like I've been established in the field and then this happened. No, I'm getting cleared by supervisors right now for job positions. There's a podcast that I'm including a link for in this post. It talks about the author of a book called The Respondent. In this book, this gentleman details the greedy, corrupt family court, the cartel of family court, as this psychologist refers to it. And now I can see it in my own life. They're abusing our children and parents. I'm so happy our kids could stay in the home that they were raised in through our divorce. The last thing I would have wanted for them is to have to sell off that house at that time and force them out. However, now I'm being forced out of my home. Rapunzel can become Mother Gothel in the story of Tangled. That girl who was once on the shore choosing between and not, I didn't blame her. Now she's become the one that is keeping my children, our children, locked away in a tower with lies. The fact she has done all this now is all the evidence I need of her true motive. It's all only ever been a fight for the narrative. Her and this court have won, and we all have lost, big time. This has been going on for decades. For those who want to say I'm playing the victim or trying to blame everything on my ex, I've owned my sin, mainly which was self-medicating rather than relying on support and coping positively. I took action to prove my repentance there. I also don't claim to have been a perfect husband, but I was not abusive. I loved her dearly and did everything I could to support her during our marriage and after she left. I'm thankful for those who supported me, all of you. I'm hoping my teens and I can heal in time and find a way to move on. They are everything to me and part of my heart. Some days are easier than others. Packing up this house and downsizing from 4 rooms to 2 and selling many of the things that brought so many joyful memories into the lives of my children and I has been by far the most difficult thing that I've ever done. I've broken into uncontrollable sobbing about twice a day, thinking about all the memories with my kids and all the memories that I'm missing with them. I want more than anything to be reunited with them and would do anything for it. But I can't live a lie. I think it's disgusting that I've been forced in this position. Snakes become dragons, and one little lie from a decade ago has turned into a dragon. And rather than fessing up to it, she's chosen to double down at every turn, to the point of abusing our children and I, and forcing me to be homeless, us to be homeless. I know they get to stay with their mom, but they don't get to stay with their dad. And now, for the time being, I have to find a new option. I'm thankful that God is leading me through. I trust that He's going to lead my children back to me. One of my favorite lyrics from any of my songs that I listened to yesterday is from my song, Children of the Light. Lord, I find it gets me every time when I look into my children's eyes. 'Cause I know that even if they fall into the serpent's nest, You'll guide them back to You. I understand the pain our Father must feel, at least in some small way, to watch this evil world with all its lies tear His children away from Him for a time. But thankfully, I know my children and they know me. I've been inspired to complete my doctorate and to specialize in working with couples and families. We need to start respecting love, marriage, and family again for what God intended them to be, lifelong commitments. We need to shift our focus back on preserving and upholding the family at all costs and take the power out of the greedy, corrupt, snake-like hands of these attorneys who are destroying our communities. We need to fight for our families the way that our God fights for us. I want to thank you all for listening. This is not an easy chapter to be closing, but I do have hope that whenever one door closes, another door opens. I want to say that my door is always open to my children, and I hope that God continues to heal us. I pray that God is with them wherever they go. And I want to close by singing a song that I wrote for my children. I thank God every day that He gave me someone like you. And I know wherever I go, You're always with me too. Because even when we're apart, You're always right here in my heart. Now and forever, always remember, I love You.